Hey everyone, it's David, and today we won't speak about any UX principles or laws, just create some nice looking UI elements for your game in a retro futuristic style, because who doesn't like futuristic stuff? I mean, what a stupid question. It's gonna be a little bit different, because today we're gonna be doing something very simple with minimum layers, but it will look very complex. So let's begin. These are the dimensions that I work on my Photoshop file, so that I keep all the sharpness and all the details when I transfer elements to other programs whatsoever. All right. So as we already know, we start everything by creating a rectangle. Create a prolongated rectangle and give it some nice radius. I noticed some of you asked for me to have this software that actually can represent my keyboard on the screen. If you know some good software like this, please let me know, because I've tried some of them, but they don't work as I would like to. Meanwhile, I'll be explaining what I'm pressing on the keyboard, so just pay attention to what I say. Hold Control and Shift and drag it with your mouse sideways. It will ask you if you want to basically ruin the live shape and you won't be able to manipulate the corners again. And of course, you want to do this. Select this little corner here and just nudge it a little bit to the side so that this corner looks prettier. Now the corners look much better. Let's give this rectangle a nice dark blue color, something like this. Double click this rectangle, and you know what, let's call it base, and also let's put it inside a base folder. Double click it to enter the layer style, and now let's create glossiness to this very simple shape. Okay, nothing special. So let's do some inner shadow and let's have it all around our shape. So something like this. And by the way, this aqua color suits well, but I think we can do it much lighter. So even somewhere like here. Let's create another inner shadow, and this one is going to be very thin, just as the inner glow of our previous inner shadow that was like stronger, as if it's actually some kind of glowing element, right? But it has this light scattering inside of it, so we want to represent it by having this spread of light effect inside this element. The same two colors, but one is really dense, the other is spread and with dropped opacity. Let's also create a drop shadow for this shape, and also let's give it some volume through this drop shadow. Let's give it some thickness by having it float beneath with some darker colors, and underneath this one we're gonna have a spreaded drop shadow that's gonna represent the glow from these buttons, so something brighter. Okay, so here let's harden the opacity and let's make this color darker so that we see how it affects this shape. Here let's make it also strong enough, and let's add here some glowing bluish tint, very feathered. And also let's add just another one, stronger but smaller in size. Bring it back to the base of the shape and also make it a little bit brighter, something like this. Maybe we can add here a little bit more purple to this blue. And you see, just with a few layer styles, our shape already looks somewhat futuristic. And we're not done yet. Let's add a little bit more interesting colors inside of this shape. Right, so go back to the effects and we will add some gradient overlays to this shape. Okay, so click this gradient color rectangle and it will open this color palette. Okay, change this top square, it's the opacity stops, change its opacity to 0. By clicking and dragging it down, you can remove these color stops. So we need only one here. Double click it and it will open the color picker. And let's have some purples to this button. Rotate it, increase the scale. I'm imagining it as if this purple light hits from the bottom of this button. Now if you click and drag inside this button, you will actually be able to manipulate the distance of this gradient. Currently it's too strong, so let's just make it subtle, and let's also maybe add a little bit blues to this purple, something like this. Let's try it again, increase the opacity. Okay, it's looking nice. Now let's copy this gradient overlay by just clicking plus, and now rotate it to the other direction. Change the scale to somewhere around 70, and the color now, let's change it to aqua color. We can change opacity now so that we don't lose our nice glossiness that we did in the beginning with the inner shadows. This way we really create these nice transitions with our gradient overlays inside this button. And as you can see, we are still only in one layer. We are still doing all the manipulations in layer style, meaning we have nothing else added to this layer basically. Okay, everything that's done is done inside of it. Let's maybe adjust this inner shadow a tiny bit, like so, and let's see what happens if we do the linear dodge. You know what, actually it looks great. Maybe increase the choke a little bit and reduce the size, something like this. And this gradient overlay that we did here, let's also have it on the other side of the button as well. It looks very nice. I think we can add 2 additional gradient overlays. It's gonna be radial, and let's see if we can make something interesting from it. So first of all, increase its size, and let's see regarding the colors if we can do something interesting here. So first, adjusting the opacity stops. Let's have this color much bluer, and let's take it here. And the reason why I'm using the radial style here and instead of the linear is that I want to give this color some roundness to it. It's not necessary. You definitely can do it without it, and it still will look good, but I just wanted to have this curvature instead of just a straight line. Duplicate it, and also let's have it on the bottom side of this element as well, as if it's glowing from both directions. What we can do now is have the same gradients again, but this time linear from the bottom to make this area glow a little bit more, and the same from the top as well. Now let's create something that every futuristic element has, and it's the glass effect. Command J to duplicate this element, drag it outside the base folder, Ctrl G, create another folder with this shape inside, and let's call it glass. First of all, get rid of every layer style that we did previously. The color of this element is irrelevant because the feel of it we're gonna drop to 0. Change also the name of the layer to glass. Double click it to enter the layer styles, and here just reset to default list. Create the same inner shadow that we had previously, and you know what, let's make this glass bigger than our base shape for a few reasons. First, let's create an interesting differentiation in the shape itself, and also it's going to enable us to see what we are actually doing. Put the choke here to 0 and increase the size to something like this maybe. Right now it works. Now create another inner shadow, but this time the size should be 0 and the distance 7 is okay. And size also just a tiny bit, like 2 will be enough. And opacity like 40%. By the way, the color for this is of course somewhere in the whiter zones of our colors. Okay, you can add this bevel and emboss with inner bevel, depth at 1, size at 6, and soften at 0 with these parameters on the shading and angle, altitude stuff, and the color is also again white tints of basically any color that you want. Looks okay for now. Let's approve it. And now let's create this glossy shimmer that you see on every glass representation. So by clicking L, I'm selecting this lasso tool. Now create a nicely angled shape. And this is the first time that we create additional layer above our base shape. And now fill it with white color. Click D on your keyboard, click X, and it will switch your primary and secondary color. So now you have white on top and black on the bottom. Alt and backspace will actually fill this selection with the primary color. We're gonna hit Alt and move the mouse in between those layers, the highlight and the base, and you will see the cursor change to this arrow and square, and just click with your mouse. And as you can see, this layer became the clipping mask of this glass layer. Okay, but you don't see it, and it's because our fill is set to 0. We still want the fill to be 0 because we don't want this top color go to the layer styles of this glass layer. And here you will see these advanced blendings. Click blend interior effect as group and deselect blend clip layer as group. And now, as you can see, our shine appeared on this element. Drop its opacity 10. It looks very nice. And now click this icon here and create a mask for this. Now by clicking B on your keyboard and just go over it slightly on the upper corner to create this nice feathered effect to this gloss. Use this blur tool to blur this strong line here. Just don't forget to switch to the layer itself and not to the mask of it. And now just go over it a few times like this to create this nice transition of this gloss effect. And now let's create what no futuristic element can live without. And of course, I'm talking about the neon. Neon on this button. So go to the base shape again, Ctrl J to duplicate, drag it on top of everything, and Ctrl G to make its own group. And let's call this one neon. Now, by clicking A, I'm entering shape parameters. And here I have this fill color, right? So remove this fill color and instead enable the stroke color, right? So we still have our effects enabled. Let's remove them. Increase the size of this stroke. Okay, 20 looks good. Let's position it somewhere around our shape, but that it creates some interesting differentiation in the shape as well. We need to adjust few layer styles for this neon. In the layer styles, we need an outer glow. Of course, neons are light emitters and we want to resemble it in our design. Just try to copy the same parameters that I have, but basically it's size big enough so that it looks as if it's emitting light, opacity again big enough so that you see what actually you're doing. So it also needs to be delicate, okay? Somewhere in the center usually it works. We need this neon to look also like a light bulb, so it also has a roundness to it, and we can create this roundness or by inner shadows, or we actually can try the bevel and emboss, so something like this. We also can do the inner shadow to make it even bigger, to make this highlights stand out even more, something like this, and another inner shadow from the other direction, and let's make it this very bright tint of aqua color. As I'm evaluating this shape, I understand that we are missing texture, and of course I'm talking about some kind of futuristic texture to it. First, create a square canvas and click D on your keyboard to set the color to black, and Alt and backspace to color the canvas. Ctrl A to select all the canvas and go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. Just name it Square Brush. You just created yourself a square brush. We're gonna adjust its parameters now. So spacing, we're gonna set it to a big amount. And of course the size as well. We need smaller particles here. Okay, it's starting to get somewhere. Now shape dynamics, slide it all across 100. Good. Now scattering, but here don't overkill it. I think I can increase the size even more and spacing less. And there isn't some particular setting for this that you need to follow, just, you know, experiment. Another thing that we can do is activate this transfer, put it around 70% and just give it a go. And you see a nice differentiation in the opacity of this brush stroke. Create a clipping mask for this one and just give it a few strokes here and there. Okay, looks very interesting, I must say. And we can have another one just like that, but this time bigger brush and darker color. And now we have a very interesting play with the depth inside this button. And also, of course, don't forget to save your brush preset. Here in this brush settings, you have this square with plus. Just click it and name your brush so that you don't lose all the settings and parameters that you created right now. And now let's add some flares to this element to make it even better. Create a new layer and have a round brush set to hardness at 0 and with relatively big size. Just tap once on the screen and with Ctrl T activate it transform cube. Okay, now by holding Alt and dragging it, you will see that you actually make it smaller, but if you hold Alt and Shift, then you will squish it like so. And this is what we need. We want to create some nice glows and flares. So by Alt and dragging, you're actually duplicating the same layer. Now with Alt and Shift, transform and make it smaller. Again, Alt and drag and transform, rotate, make it bigger. Create a new layer. And with a round brush, same round brush, but very small one, create few dots here and there on the neon layer that you created to make it look even nicer. Cool, now take all these layers and put them in a group, call this group flares. And this button looks already so nice, but what we're missing is the most important thing on a button. We are missing the CTA. We're missing the call to action. What this button supposed to do once we click it. For me, it's just a button, and therefore I'm gonna name it button. Okay, T to select the text tool, click on the screen and just write button. The font name is Omnium Wide and it actually suits perfectly with this button because it also looks somewhat like a neon light that we did previously. And of course, typography makes a big difference when you create something. The typography should speak the same language as everything else on the screen. And let's make this text yellow. Color overlay. And making it yellow to have the same kind of effect that we did in our neon layer. And of course, some kind of outer glow as well, because it glows. Can be more orange, some kind of reflective drop shadow. Wow, it actually actually it's really nice. Let's have it on reddish colors with a little opacity and bigger size, and we can add even more saturation to the color. As I did this, I suddenly understood that also our neon should be reflected inside the main element, the base. Alt and drag, we're gonna duplicate this neon layer, make a clipping mask out of it and move it around to see where it would be best to actually place it. Filter and blur, Gaussian blur, convert a smart object, it's fine, very subtle blur, and of course opacity as well. Suddenly it made everything even better. And of course it's because now it looks even more realistic. And I hope you also see it from your own experience that these are very simple techniques that we did in the process of this video, and you managed to do something very nice and very complex looking. And let's also have few glowing flares on this text as well. So something like this. Merge all these highlights together and Ctrl J to duplicate, and let's have some motion blur to them. Let's have it higher maybe, and drop the opacity a little bit just to give it a little bit more information. And we're done. Thank you all for sticking to the end of this video. Hopefully you learned a few new tricks for yourself. If you did, please let me know in the comment section below. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. This is the whole purpose of this channel, to create beautiful stuff together in a simple way. Just like my t-shirt says, stay simple, just like that. This video on itself doesn't hold water. You need to go and watch this video as well if you really want to kick up your UI design skill level.